Hello, everyone. Good afternoon to you. Happy Saturday afternoon to you. Well, it's been a while, hasn't it? Got that extra Saturday in January. So instead of 2 weeks passing by, it was 3 weeks that passed by. But I'm so glad to be here again. We are closer to the spring. Today, we probably had about 80 degrees, but I am in South Texas. So we do get subtropical weather. We don't get any snow, and if we do, it's rare. And especially here in southern Texas, northern Texas, which is hours away because Texas is so big, they do get a little bit more snow. But still, winters are very, very mild compared to further up north, like New England, places like that. But anyway, I'm so glad to be here again. Glad to have you join me. It's a minute after the hour, so I'll just go ahead and get started. All right. Let me go ahead and share my screen, and I'm going to just double check the technology and make sure that everything is connected the way it should be. All right, here we go. Okay, hopefully you should see on your screen right now, welcome to the Exceedingly Abundantly podcast, or Abundant Wellness. That's what I have been calling it. That was the old name. But Abundant Wellness flows out easier. So welcome to the Abundant Wellness podcast. All right, I see that I am live. Well, again, I would like to welcome you to Abundant Wellness. We meet here every second and fourth Saturday of the month at 3 p.m. Central Standard Time. As I said earlier, I am located in Texas. I am Joanne McDermott. This is brought to you by me. I am a board-certified functional nutrition and lifestyle practitioner and a mental health coach. So I'm a nutritionist, but as a functional nutritionist, I'm not just telling you what you should eat and what you shouldn't eat. There's a whole psychology behind getting you from point A to point B. You know, you have a certain place that you want to be, where you want to get at, where you want to go to. And a lot of times you know exactly what needs to be done, but you just can't get yourself to get over there. And there's a lot of factors that play into you not being able to get to the next point, or not being able to stay on track, or struggling with that. And so it's not just, sometimes it's things going on with your body. Sometimes it is emotion, stress, how you're feeling mentally. That plays a big part, causes a really big roadblock in you being able to heal and being able to get to where you want to be. I mean, some people come out with this, well, you know what, you just don't have enough willpower, or maybe I just don't have enough willpower. But I want to let you know that it is more than just willpower. It is not just about willpower. And as a functional nutritionist, this is where we dive into, look into, because at the end of the day, I am all about trying to find the underlying root causes of why you are in the situation that you're in right now. And that's why I also am certified as a mental health coach, because you know what? The physical body and the human body, they're all one. And then there's a spiritual component as well. It's all three in one. One does not exist without the other, and one is not fulfilled without the other. So today we are going to be talking about regularity. For the month of February, we're talking about regularity. Today is part 1. I'll see you in a couple weeks, and we will talk about the next portion of that in part 2. Next 2 weeks we'll have regularity part 2. So what do I mean by regularity? Have you heard that term before? Has your doctor or a medical professional asked you, are you regular? What are they talking about? Well, they are talking about your bowel movements. How often do you have bowel movements a day? Do you go once or twice a day? Or do you go once or twice a week? Maybe some of you can relate to this cartoon picture here. This stool shall pass, kind of a play on words. This too shall pass is the true expression. But if you're going to the bathroom only once or twice a week, you might be experiencing some constipation, and you feel that the stool is there, but it's not quite coming out. You're wondering if it's ever going to come out. And so you have to tell yourself, hey, don't worry, you know what? This too shall pass. I'm going to get over this difficult time. Well, bowel movements occur as a result of eating. So apparently, some portions or some parts of the food that we eat, our body does not want it. Our body is not finding it useful. Maybe it's finding it a bit harmful. And so our body kind of has to decipher and go through its filtering, decide what to keep, what to get rid of. And it certainly has a part that it just wants to get rid of. And that is why we have our bowel movements. Right? Bowel movements happen as a result of eating. So it kind of makes sense that you should, well, yeah, I didn't even really tell you this. How often should we be having bowels? Well, let's just think about how often should we be having our bowel movements. Well, I'm throwing that question out to you, but I want you to just think about that for a moment. And think about this. Have you ever had food poisoning before? What happened? Shortly after you ate, you had to go running to the bathroom, and you probably stayed in there for a good while, sitting on the toilet there with intense stomach cramping. Does that sound familiar? That was your body's way of getting rid of unwanted substances out of your system as quickly as possible, not even waiting for the food to fully digest or digest fully or properly, and thus what comes out? Diarrhea. Because you see, when we have a bowel movement, it's supposed to come out like a solid, and it doesn't come out right away. It's a process as the food goes from your mouth and eventually, to your anus there. It's a process. So if you're eating and boom, in less than an hour, you have to go to the bathroom. When it comes out, it's diarrhea. A lot of times it's food poisoning. It's associated with sometimes feeling nauseous. You may even vomit. You just don't feel good at all. A good sign of food poisoning. And so again, when we have these bowel movements, our body is just trying to get rid of stuff that it deems not good for us, potentially harmful to us. Or maybe there's some of you that have fasted. So you've gone a certain number of hours, quite a long time in fact, without eating anything at all. Maybe it's because you're on a diet. Maybe you have to have a procedure done at the hospital or the doctor's office, and they tell you, okay, you got to make sure you don't eat before having this procedure done, and you are forced to have to fast for some time. Maybe you just didn't get a chance to eat because you had such a busy day. And I want you to stop and think about this for a minute. For those times that you end up not eating as much, do you notice that you don't have a bowel movement as often? You're not going to the bathroom as much. Maybe when you're eating your regular amount of food during the day, maybe you're having your bowel movements more frequently. Have you ever noticed that? Stop and pay attention to that. Well, the frequency of your bowels do change based on the amount of times that you eat. Because, you see, we have bowel movements when we eat. The reason why the bowel movement happens is because of food that we have eaten. So, taking that into consideration, that would mean, would you think that it's safe to say every time you eat should be, or the amount of times that you eat should be equivalent to the amount of bowel movements that you have for that day, right? 3 meals a day, then you should have had 3 bowel movements a day. Maybe even 2, depending on what time of the day that you ate. And truly, that is the rule of thumb. For every time you eat, you should be having a bowel movement. But I want to tell you, at the very least, maybe that might sound like a lot, but at the very least, you should be having at least 1 bowel movement a day if you are eating every day. So if you're not eating every day, I don't know, you fasted for a whole day, you may not have a bowel movement then or the next day. But if you're eating, especially if you're eating multiple times throughout the day, and you've been doing this every day, you should be having at least 1 bowel movement there. So keep that in mind. Well, let's kind of take a little closer look at what happens when we eat this food. You know, how does it become food and then ends up being part of our bowels? So as you take that apple to eat, it goes into your mouth, right? You bite a piece of that apple and you crunch down on it with your teeth and your molars. Your mouth is the first place where digestion takes place. And actually, I want you to also picture a hamburger. You know, that hamburger, it's in between 2 buns, a little ketchup is on it. So the first digestion that takes place in the mouth is going to be the breaking down of the carbs or the sugars. So that sweetness, the sugar from the apple, the bread, as your teeth, your molars are biting and breaking it down, it is turning that bread into a carbohydrate. And then that carbohydrate turns into sugar. So all of that, the bread and the sugar from the apple, that digestion is already happening down. When I say digestion, I mean like really breaking it down into, our teeth are kind of like the food processor. It breaks it down, but it's not puree, it's not a liquid. And then the digestive enzymes that come in break it down even more into a liquefying it. Really just turning it into liquid. So the enzymes in your mouth already are doing that when it comes to the carbs or any kind of sugar. Then the food, as you swallow it, goes down the esophagus. See that tube there? Then it goes into the stomach. Then in the stomach, there's more breaking down or digestion that takes place. That's the part of your body where the protein is being broken down. So that hamburger bun, the hamburger itself, whether it's an animal burger coming from, beef or turkey burger or chicken burger, or even your veggie burgers, because those a lot of times are made from soybeans or like your black bean burger. But anyway, it's protein. So there's certain enzymes within the stomach that help that breakdown of the protein. Now it's liquefied, and now it goes from your stomach. Now the food goes into your small intestines. And the small intestines, there's one more piece of absorption that needs to take place, and that is the breaking down of your fats. So that mayonnaise that was spread on the bread, that's fat, because it has eggs inside there and it has oil. And it's the bile and the bile salts from the gallbladder and enzymes from the pancreas that help to break down, or they also call it emulsify, that fat. It is important for everything to be broken down so small, because that is the only way your body's going to be able to absorb it. All right, so now everything is all done, broken down, and now it goes into the large intestines. Well, before it's broken down, still in the small intestines, now it's able to be absorbed into the bloodstream. Let's take a little closer look at that. The small intestine has three parts to it. The first part is where that breaking down of the fat happens, and then the second, that's called the duodenum. Then the second part is the jejunum. That is where the actual absorption takes place. So you can kind of see it here too. The digested food in the intestines, and it's going into the bloodstream. That is how an apple turns into food, inside your body. And then the last part of the small intestine is called the ileum. I think little leftover pieces of food that still needs to be absorbed, hasn't been absorbed yet. That is where your vitamin B12, gets absorbed. So just thinking about those people that have had any kind of bariatric surgery where they take a piece of your stomach, maybe even a piece of your intestines, or some other people may have had some conditions where part of their intestine had to be taken out, maybe a colonoscopy or endoscopy was done, they saw some polyps, it was cancerous, and they have to take some out. For whatever reason, well, it really does throw off your body's ability to absorb. Even iron gets absorbed in the part of the, is it the esophagus? It is part of the small, it's the stomach, actually. And that gets where it allows, the iron to get absorbed as well. Oh, I'm sorry, no. It's part of the small intestines. So the small intestines helps for that iron and the vitamin B12 to get absorbed. But in the stomach is a certain material that gets released. It's the intrinsic factor that helps the vitamin B12 to get absorbed, into the small intestine. So, again, just anybody that has had to have a part of the stomach or a part of the intestines removed, it really does interfere with your body's ability to absorb food and to especially absorb certain nutrients. Just kind of really throws it off. So I would say if you want to do something like that, or you have to do something like that, I would make that a last resort. There really is other options. And I was talking earlier, maybe some of you might feel like, oh, I just can't lose the weight. You can. You just have to be connected with the right professional or with the right medical provider for you. And anybody that does any functional medicine, functional nutrition will be able to help you with that. All right, so moving right along. Okay, now the food goes from the small intestines and then it goes into the large intestines. Now, here, there isn't any absorption, or there should not be any absorption that is happening. So the colon, you have the ascending colon because it goes up, the transverse colon because it goes across, and then the descending colon. That's the last part of the colon until it gets to the anus, the rectum, and the anal canal where the feces comes out. This is where, these are the food particles that got rejected. Basically, your body decided, okay, we need to get this out. We don't need this. This is just going to be a deterrent to the body. We need to get it out. When it goes in here, it's all liquid, but the colon, one of its jobs, one of the things it does is to remove the water, the liquid, from the substances there. And so that's why by the time it comes out, it is a solid. So when you're having a bowel movement and it comes out kind of watery, it hasn't had the chance to fully extract, the fluid out because it's just going too fast. It's coming out too soon. That's diarrhea. And again, food poisoning, your body says, no, we can't wait. We can't wait for the liquid to come out. We need to just get this food or this substance out of the body as soon as possible. So that is what takes place there, and that's kind of how our feces are formed there. And I used to wonder, feces, it's unwanted waste. it's not useful. Our body doesn't need it. Our body doesn't want it. And I used to wonder, when God created man, why did he create the body in such a way to get rid of this waste? Well, okay, actually, there might be a logical answer to that question. Well, it's waste, so we can keep from getting sick. We can get that stuff out of us and not be bent over in pain because of that poisonous, the poison from the food is making us sick. But then again, I still thought, I still questioned about any kind of suffering or pain or illness or sickness. It's a result of sin. And it wasn't like that, when God first made this world, when he made Adam and Eve. And I always wondered, with Adam and Eve, I wondered if they had to put out any waste. God made the world perfect. There wasn't any waste. Everything had a purpose. And then the thought came to my mind, well, probably Adam and Eve, they did have the large intestines, and they probably did, excrete, and had to go to the bathroom just like the rest of us. But perhaps, maybe, back then, without sin being in the world, their feces possibly was useful and helpful and beneficial. Not to stay in the body, but useful in another area. So think about it. Any of you out there that have done any kind of farming before, is there a feces that we use to benefit our garden? In fact, when we add it to our garden, it really makes our garden flourish and grow. Can anybody think? What animal do we use, or what animal feces do we use? Very, very typical, very common. Anybody that has done any kind of farming would know this. Do we use dog feces? No, we do not. Cat feces? No, we get rid of that cat litter as quickly as possible. It's manure from the cow. Cow feces. Well, we don't even call it cow feces. We call it manure. That sounds better. People save up these cow feces, and people even will buy it. I used to when I was doing my gardening, and you put it out on the garden, and it is fantastic fertilizer. In fact, I believe people even use chicken poop, very good fertilizer, and it does make your garden flourish. So maybe there was a time before sin that human feces was able to be used like that. Because, when we learn about God and his ways and his character, it's always a lot of giving to receive. In nature, we see a lot of given to receive. So, perhaps giving your feces, you're able to help for the grass, the vegetation to grow better, and now the cows have more food. And isn't it interesting how we don't use our own feces, as a means to fertilize our garden, but we'll use the cow feces. What do the cows eat? They just eat the grass. They're plant-based. They eat healthy. They're not eating all of this processed foods that we're eating. So I guess it makes sense that in this day and age, people are still using cow feces as fertilizer. But we most certainly are not using human feces. Anyway, just kind of went on a little side note there. I was just wondering about waste and what's the purpose of waste? Why would God create it? Maybe in the beginning there was a purpose for it, but there isn't a purpose for it now anymore because sin has entered into our world. All right, let's get back into our topic here, our main topic, regularity and the feces and the stool passing. So we always want to ensure that our gut is healthy. When I say gut, I am talking about the large and the small intestines. So if you ever hear that expression, have a healthy gut, what is your gut? Gut dysbiosis. Gut is meaning your intestines. We always want to make sure that it's good and healthy because that's what's going to help your waste to be passing the way it should. That's what's going to help the food to be passing the way it should. And that's also going to be helping the food to digest the way it should. So what makes a healthy gut? A healthy gut is when there's good gut flora that is residing inside of your small and large intestines. When I say gut flora, I'm talking about the pattern, the array of bacteria. So inside of our gut, our small intestines especially, but also in our large intestines, we have thousands and thousands of microorganisms, basically, bacteria. And it's supposed to be there, and it does have a place there. And there's good bacteria and there is bad bacteria. But we always want to make sure that there's more of the good bacteria than the bad bacteria. And they have so many roles. They help to break down. They contribute to helping to break down the food, along with our enzymes, that get released. And they also help to kill off any weird, foreign, strange pathogens that enter, into our body. Maybe there might have been some little wrong, bad bacteria on the food that we didn't realize. We ingest it, we swallow it. The body will recognize it right away, the bacteria, and it will actually get rid of it and kill it and damage it so it doesn't get absorbed into our bodies and we get sick. Isn't that pretty amazing? So that good in bacteria, it certainly does have its place, and we want that bacteria to be there, and we want there to be a healthy balance. Now, as food is digested, it has to move along. I showed you the picture earlier where, especially in the small intestines, it's just kind of, seems like it's squished in there. Because if you pull it out, if you were to pull it out, it would be quite long. I think it's like 30 feet. And can you imagine like a 30-foot rope that's inside your inside your abdominal area? So it's kind of squished in there. So how does the food end up moving to the next section and next section, eventually to the large intestines and out of us? Well, it's through an activity which your body just does automatically. It's called peristalsis, and the muscles of the walls of the intestines they contract or they squeeze. It just does that. It's wave-like muscle contractions that help to move the food along, and that just happens naturally, happens regularly. Some of us may not have very good peristalsis. One of the things, sometimes we call that motility. The doctors will call that motility, the ability of the food particles, to pass through the intestines. And some of us have poor motility. One of the things that can help improve your motility is exercise. Exercise in general always just helps to build muscle, and so as your muscle builds, including the muscles in your abdominal area, including your large and small intestines, as it builds, it becomes stronger. So it will contract more harder, more firm, and allow that food to pass by. So exercise improves motility, but also serotonin. Serotonin is it's a hormone, a neurotransmitter. It's really considered the happy hormone, but serotonin has many purposes and many things that it does, one of which is to increase your motility. We get serotonin from sunshine outside. So, if you find that, my food isn't passing and moving the way it should, maybe you need to increase your serotonin. Now, interestingly enough, even though there's good and bad bacteria in the small intestine as well as the large intestines, interestingly enough, they each have their own set of bacteria. So there's bacteria that's specific to the small intestines, and then there's another type or other types of bacteria that's specific to the large intestines. And they each have to stay in their own place, because when it starts to get mixed together, it becomes a problem. Sometimes the bacteria in the large intestines end up creeping into the small intestine. So you can see some of that green that's now also inside of the small intestines. Okay, so over here, the small intestines, the bacteria is just blue, and the bacteria in the large intestines is green. Looking at the picture on the right, we have some of that green bacteria of the large intestines inside the small intestines. And that is a big no-no. We don't want that. When that happens, we have what's called SIBO, which stands for small intestine bacteria overgrowth. There's an overgrowth or too much. There's an overgrowth of the bacteria of the large intestine, and it ends up creeping its way into the small intestines. And it causes problems. It causes pain. It causes discomfort, upset stomach, having a hard time eating, figuring out what to eat, because everything you eat just makes you sick. You might think is a food allergy, but no. Everything that you eat is just making you not feel good. It can be a little bit tricky to get rid of, but just kind of sticking to it, things can get better. This is definitely one of those situations where prevention is worth a pound of cure. Prevention much better than trying to cure it, because it is kind of hard to cure. So yeah, we want to, having that healthy gut, we want to make sure that all the bacteria is in its place and not creeping over to the other places. So sometimes what causes things that can cause our gut to be unhealthy is the foods that we eat. So if we're eating those foods that are high fat and high sugar, that can cause the bacteria to be out of balance, can cause there to be more of the bad and less of the good. The bad bacteria loves sugar. So if you're eating a lot of sugar, that's going to encourage the bad bacteria to grow. Fiber, on the other hand, is more helpful for the good bacteria. There is a bacteria in the large intestines that eats fiber. So there's certain foods where it doesn't break down because it's just too fibrous. Think of like a celery. After eating a piece of celery, and you chew it and chew it and chew it, and it doesn't break down anymore, and it goes through the into the small intestine. Too big, it's not breaking down. It'll pass into the large intestines, and there are some fibers that will do that. And that's a good thing, and it does that on purpose, because then those fibers are specific food to the bacteria that's in the large intestines. We call those resistant starches because they are resistant to being broken down. And so fiber is very good. Foods that, your junk food, foods that are that tend to be high fat and high sugar, they tend to have very low fiber. So that is going to throw off the healthy balance of good and bad bacteria. Having a sedentary lifestyle, having chronic stress, these are factors that contribute to not having that healthy gut. When we don't have that healthy gut, it's just going to interfere with not only our digestion, but the way everything, what happens to the food as it's in our gut, how well your body's able to absorb, and maybe even the way in which things pass through. The gut's just not operating and functioning the way it's supposed to. Another big thing, and your processed foods too, they tend to have additives to it. Additives like preservatives, so that the food doesn't spoil, coloring, so that your drink is blue instead of a natural, I don't know, red or even clear. And emulsifiers are added to foods sometimes to give it more of a creamy, texture. These additives a lot of times are not food. Your body can't do anything with it. It has to be passing through. You cause your body to be working more than it needs to. All of this just kind of puts a little pressure and stress, on your gut and your intestines there, and takes away from it being nice and healthy. And another thing that causes our gut to not be as healthy is antibiotics. There is a movie, certain documentaries that are out there, and they are talking about a fear of a concern of the amount of antibiotics that we are taking, because they feel that so many antibiotics can cause us to end up becoming resistant to antibiotics, down the line. Because the one thing about bugs and, or I'm going to call it microorganisms, is that they're always working to outsmart us. You know, we come up with an antibiotic, they figure out how to get around it and survive. You know, that antibiotic, don't die from it, and build up. I don't know, maybe their own antibodies against our antibodies. And so what happens is that antibiotic is no longer working or functioning as it should, and so it's like these bacteria are becoming resistant to the antibiotic. So the more we take it, the more we end up becoming, the more resistance there is, and we have to be making stronger and stronger and stronger antibiotics. But the antibiotics too, what it does is it kills bacteria. So it's killing not only the bad bacteria, but it's also killing the good bacteria. And so we are throwing off that gut biosis, that flora that's in our intestines and our guts that we need to keep it nice and strong and healthy. Now, I had talked about fiber and how, you know, the gut, it likes fiber. There's the soluble and insoluble fiber. I think I'll talk more about that next week. But I do want to mention that another benefit to fiber, benefit to our gut, our small and large intestine, well, particularly the large intestines, is that it helps to keep us from being constipated. Fiber, in and of itself, directly helps that waste to move along the small intestines, the large intestines there. The peristalsis does, as I mentioned before, but also the fiber. I don't know if any of you have had a child that has experienced really, really bad constipation. A mother was telling me how she got a call from the school saying that her son was just bent over in pain in his abdominal area. She had to go to the school and pick him up and brought him home. Well, it turned out that he was just severely constipated, and the mother just encouraged him to just stay on the toilet there and just, keep working at it and working at it. And it's painful because, you see, that constipation, the feces had sat, in his gut for so long. It starts to get very hard after a while. And with each day, it becomes more and more and more solid. So trying to pass it becomes very, very painful. The muscles are having to stretch in a way that they are not used to or they were not designed to. And it's just going to cause him all the more to not want to have a bowel movement. It's just making matters worse. She had to really push him and encourage him and stay there with him in the bathroom until he finally did pass. But I've heard of stories, until the feces finally did pass, but I have heard of stories where parents had to bring their children to the hospital. I had never heard of someone needing to go to the hospital because of constipation until recently. But that certainly was not a condition of the past. Back in the days when we were farmers, we ate a lot of fruits and vegetables. But you know what? It doesn't just happen to the kids. It can happen to us adults too, for the same reason, not having enough fiber in our diet. And we push, and you know what happens when and the feces just is stuck there. You know what happens when we have to push and push and push so hard like that all the time? We start to get something called hemorrhoids. And hemorrhoids are painful. You start to bleed. There's just always this fear of having to go to the bathroom because you know that it's going to be painful. So again, this is definitely one of those scenarios where an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. I was talking earlier about the dangers of antibiotics. Again, the antibiotics, it throws off that good balance of good and bad bacteria. And what happens there is we end up having more bad bacteria than the good bacteria. And in a scenario like that is when we develop something called candida, or a yeast infection. And then now we got to take medication again. Has there been any of you out there that has ever been given antibiotics because you had a cold, some kind of bacterial cold, and so the antibiotic will kill the bacteria, help you to get better. And by the way, it's your immune system ultimately that's healing you, and not the antibiotic. The antibiotic might give you a little boost, but the antibiotic in and of itself is not healing you. It's your immune system. But anyway, another story, another topic. But so the antibiotic will kill all the bacteria. Now you've developed a yeast infection, and now you have to take medication to offset the side effects of the medication that you just took. Now you got to take an antifungal. And so it's always our goal to maintain that good gut health, which is part of our whole digestive tract there, part of where we pass our stools. We want to be passing our stools regularly. That is going to give us good gut health, and that is also going to help us to just be healthy and better, because having a healthy gut really translates into having a healthy you. As a result of having a healthy gut, that waste is being expelled from the body the way it should. The body has already deemed that this is not healthy, this is not good, this needs to get out, because if it doesn't, you will get sick, right? So having a healthy gut allows that waste to come out when it needs to and how it needs to. Having a healthy gut ensures a good balance of the good and bad bacteria so that there is no yeast infection. Having a healthy gut also translates to a healthy mood, good mood, better mood. So instead of feeling irritable and anxious and uptight and just feeling unrest and even depressed, you can feel happy and relaxed. Everything's okay, everything's going to be okay, you're at peace, you're happy. Just by having a healthy gut will lead to better moods like that. And why is that? Because there's something called the gut-brain connection. There is a connection between the gut and the brain. Whatever is happening in your mind will happen in your gut, and whatever is happening in your gut will happen in your mind. So if you're often having an upset stomach because of maybe foods that you're eating that you should not eat, doesn't agree with you, you are having a sensitivity or allergy, allergic reaction to that food, and you're just having an upset stomach all the time, you will find that oftentimes you may also feel irritable, tend to be more short, tend to be more impatient, because when all is well in one area, all is well in the other area, and vice versa, and it's bidirectional as well. So sometimes it starts in the mind, and if you find that you're stressed all the time, you're upset, you're mad, you're frustrated, you're angry, you feel a lot of resentment, that in and of itself can give you stomach issues and just feeling upset in your stomach as well. But a healthy gut will also result in a healthy immunity. If you find that, oh man, my stomach's not feeling good, it's feeling upset, and then next thing you know, you're getting a cold, and you're finding that you're getting colds often, you're getting sick all the time, it could be, that would be directly related to your immune system, but can also be related to your unhealthy gut, because over 70% of your immunity, your immune system, is inside the gut. That's pretty amazing. So if your gut is off, your immunity is going to be off. You're going to be getting a lot of colds and struggling with getting better. So we truly want to ensure that we have that healthy gut. We want to make sure that the stools are passing and they are not getting stuck there and they are not staying there. Because if the feces is not passing out, remember, it should be passing every day. For every extra day that it stays there, do you know what happens? It's going to end up getting reabsorbed back into your body. What do I mean by that? The feces getting reabsorbed back inside your body. I want you to envision opening up a bottle of lotion and squirting it on your arm and then just rubbing it into your arm, what happens? That lotion eventually gets absorbed into your skin, right? You see it when you first apply it. Okay, it's there. It's kind of slippery. I'm rubbing it in. I keep rubbing. I keep rubbing. Eventually, I don't see it anymore because it has completely absorbed into my skin. This is what happens when we do not pass our stools. It starts to reabsorb back inside of our bodies. So that very toxin that your body was trying to get rid of, it is now going back in. So many reasons that not passing those stools, not having the healthy gut so those stools can pass, does lead to illness and sickness, chronic illnesses. Just naming a few, it could be, your diabetes, your hypertension, or high blood pressure. It could even be cancer. It could even be mental illnesses such as depression and anxiety. So we always want to make sure that that poop is coming out, getting out of us, and not causing poisons or toxicity to re-enter back inside of our body. It's just amazing, but your poop can say a lot about your health. We want to make sure that it's coming out, and it's coming out regularly. And I'll talk more into this next time we meet again in 2 weeks about how we can tell by our poop the condition of our health and even be a gauge and what we want it to look like to ensure that we're in the right direction, we're within the right range of health, good health, as opposed to being out of range and being in poor health. But the main thing that I wanted you to get today is the importance of being regular. What does it mean to be regular? Having regular bowel movements. Bowel movements happen because we eat, so it makes sense that every time you eat, you should be having a bowel movement. Okay, you might not have 3 bowel movements a day, but if you're eating every day, especially if you're eating several times a day, you should be having at least 1 bowel movement a day. The next time we get together, I'll talk about how to ensure that we are having those regular bowel movements. I'll talk about that, as well as, what our bowels should be looking like. But what I want to ask you to do in the meantime, between now and when we meet again, I'd like you to pay attention to how often you are having a bowel movement. Is it happening every day? If not, how frequently is it happen? And if it is happening every day, how often during the day are you having it? Think about how often you're eating. So just kind of pay attention to that a little bit. And I want you to take that number with you, and then we can talk about it a little bit more. And I want to encourage you to be going to the bathroom more. Well, we'll talk about more how to really get that to happen. I told you some of the things that cause it, so you can just kind of try to avoid, those things that cause it. But pay attention to that. And that's what I have for you today. I thank you for joining me. And again, we want to thank you for being a part of the Abundant Wellness Podcast. It's all about helping you to experience life more exceedingly abundantly. Again, I am Joanne McDermott. I'm a functional nutrition counselor, also a functional nutrition and lifestyle practitioner. And Abundant Wellness meets here the second and fourth Saturday of the month at 3 p.m. Central Standard Time. Well, thank you again so much for joining me. I pray that it was helpful for you. You learned something new. Don't forget to pay attention to your bowel movements. All right, take care. Bye-bye.